Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
This is Billy Hamilton, past master of Fort Worth 148, and I guess for this weekend it's applicable to say past master of Texas Lodge of Research now.
Yes, that's right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a one-year term?
It's a one-year term, yes.
Nice. Well, I'm Chris Ruli, if you haven't figured that out by now. I'm a researcher, Masonic historian out of the D.C. area. I'm a member of Federal Lodge number 1 in D.C., Alexander Washington Lodge number 22 in Virginia, and writer of a couple different things and doer of certain things as well. So happy to be here. Thank you for your lodge, the Texas Lodge of Research's invitation to bring me over and serve as this year's Anson Jones Lecturer.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us and being on this road trip.
Yes. More roadcasts. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, this is great actually, and this is perfect because this setup is going to help with like our Masonicon, because we've been talking about improving our mic setup. And
oh, nice.
Is perfect.
This is great.
And let's go to Grand Lodge. So we have some time, by the way. I don't know if you want to stop and get coffee or lunch or whatever.
Up to you. I'm on your schedule, sir.
Well, so the Hilton won't let us check in until 4.
Okay.
The Grand Lodge, though, is open. Christian's there.
Yeah.
So we could always stop in, nerd out, or whatever you want to do.
It's up to you. I'm cool with whatever.
I need to stop in anyways and get the index from the transactions that aren't included in the concise index that we just posted.
I saw that. So you guys published, what was it? It ended in 28? No, 29? 2020, not 2029, 2009. Is that right?
2009. Yeah, so we are a little bit behind.
There is a 10 onward or no?
There is a gap of 10 years. So we need to add 41 through 50.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who used to do the transaction or the index? Was it the secretary or the editor or?
No, it was Master Pete Martinez.
Okay.
I guess he took it upon himself as one of those labors of love.
Man, God bless him.
He's the one who compiled all of that through 40, and he would probably still be doing it, but he passed away.
That's right. So. That requires a certain set of discipline.
Yeah, I started.
It's really tough.
Especially because the way it's done, right? It's not enough to just put, oh, here's the name or here's the person.
That's right.
It's like you have to look at topics, you know?
Yeah. I found I'm helping Brett Morris with some similar indexing work.
Okay.
And I'm like, I know Brent and I are mathematicians.
Okay.
We literally can do math. We can do I can sit there and run, equations, and he can help me work through that, and I understand that.
Right.
He puts an index in front of me or a something that I have to index, and I'm like, I'm an idiot. Like I have to think about this. I'm like, wait, what is this again? And I think I've had so many sessions with him where he's just like, no, you're thinking of it wrong. Think of it this way, and then help me and it's learning a new language. It really is. It's sort of formatting a new language.
Well, if you have any advice, I would appreciate it because I'm a data analyst.
Oh, so. Okay. Well, the thing he told me was it's location based.
Okay.
So what I did was I go through this is boring. No one's gonna listen to this. Maybe someone will want to listen to this.
Right.
This is roadcast. It's all open to discussion. But I do names and people first. I do places and names first.
Okay.
So if I get a name, I run through the first pass and I pick up names. And then that helps me edit that out. And then I do places, people. So then I'll do Grand Lodge or whatever. And then I do topic last because topic is nuts.
Okay.
Some people do it just page by page. You start on the first page, you go through it, and you just, try to figure it out.
Yeah, I usually start with author, title, and then I start looking at the actual subjects.
Right.
Again, it's brand new to me.
Yeah.
So literally this week.
You just started this week?
Yep.
Yeah. Do you guys have a Patreon or something?
No.
I was gonna say, do a Patreon and just record the full transaction of the roadcast. Just let people see the madness.
I've been trying to talk Gabe and the Red into doing a Patreon, and but then again, I've been trying to talk them into doing video.
Oh yes,
You know,
video's good.
Video makes an impact, and I hate to say it.
It's true.
So during my year as master at a lodge,
Yeah.
I kind of like, you know what, I'm master, so I'm going to make some calls, and we did video, and we had,
Nice.
and I don't know if it's because we had video or because we had, the guests on there, but I was looking at our stats in the 2 most downloaded episodes we had.
Video cast.
Yeah, but then again, also too, the people we had on there. So the most downloaded video by far that we have is Chick and Tabby Cicero,
Okay.
and then the second most downloaded is Alon Milo Duquette.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's because
Of the topics.
of the topics of the people because they have their own following,
Right.
or because it's video. It's like I don't know what the special sauce was there, but those definitely got a lot more interest than we usually get.
I will say doing video is helpful. I've found, especially with the Supreme Council stuff,
Okay.
doing video is really helpful for 2 things. Number one, you sort of get more of the banter, the back and forth. People like to see. It's a weird thing, but people like to see other people talk
Yeah.
and how they talk, which sounds nuts, but it is true. The other thing it does, and this is the social media madness in the brain, is you can take a full video and then cut it into parts for TikTok or for Instagram, and you can do shorts through with that stuff.
Yeah, slice and dice it.
Yeah, slice and dice. So we often oh, this was really good, but I also will mark down, oh, in the 5-minute mark, you said something really good, that you can do that for like a quick 10-second thing for the for the social media, for TikTok or whatever.
Okay.
I will admit, I don't have TikTok. I don't
I
use
don't either.
TikTok. I think it's gonna be like shut down anytime soon anyway. Like
Right.
with what's going on, but people tend to appreciate Instagram and short videos, and so they'll go through hundreds of the small little videos before they'll go full video.
Right. Yeah. No, it's funny actually. I had someone let me know that there's someone pretending to be me on TikTok, and
Oh wow!
I looked at, and he sent me a screenshot, and I'm like, son of a bitch, he almost has enough followers on this fake account, to do like live broadcasts. It's like
Really?
he's almost hitting thresholds. This fake
Wow.
me. I don't know whether I should be flattered or
I
horrified.
know, that's right. Makes you wonder.
So
Who's
like if I
out there
was,
doing that stuff.
it'd be funny if I started my own, and it's like I can't even catch up with the number of followers of
Yeah.
my doppelganger.
That's right. That's wild. So we are on which highway here? We're on 183.
We're about to get on 183.
183.
Yeah,
okay.
Airport Freeway is what we
I feel
call
like I've got to narrate the roadcast to let people know what's going on where we are.
it. We're passing this wooded area.
That's right. There's a ditch here. It's a beautiful ditch.
And there's a Bigfoot.
That's right.
DFW Airport, it's interesting when you look at the stats for the size of it, right? It's,
Yeah.
it's one of the largest airports in the world, and the square area larger than the island of Manhattan.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, total like
Still
order
crazy.
of magnitude. Yeah,
Still legitimately nuts.
yeah, because when you're in Manhattan, it seems huge, and it's
Yeah.
hard to believe. It's just kind of like that spit of land.
Right. So, do people come? So, if you're going to the Grand Lodge building for a communication or whatever,
Right.
and if you're not living local, do people fly into this airport, or do they go to a different airport, or do most people just drive?
Most people drive,
Okay.
but if you're going to fly in, you're going to fly in either to Austin or DFW.
Okay.
In DFW is probably a better rate.
Nice.
Yeah, because a lot of times you'll have to fly into DFW and then hop to Austin, so it doesn't make sense.
That doesn't make sense at all. Yeah. We just rolled by a large piece of plywood. This is we are roadcasting, man.
Yeah, it's amazing the stuff you see on the. Well, I'm sure DC is kind of the same way. It's
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, on the third lane there's a couch.
There was an inflatable Santa, or a deflated Santa, I should say, that knocked out like one portion I think it was during Christmas time. I think it was some like a Salvation Army truck that had stuff in the back,
Okay.
and like it crashed with another car, and then like somehow it just sent stuff flying, and so there was a like deflated Santa balloon on the ground, just causing chaos. I'm like, this is DC right now. This is what's happening right now.
It's like tragedy, but in a festive mood.
Yeah, that's right. Festive death.
That should be
Festive
a
death.
metal band
That's right.
name. Yeah.
Yes. At minimum, hot sauce flavor. Minimum hot sauce flavor. That's the other thing we were thinking of doing, like emulating different like activities that you see on YouTube, like the Hot Ones.
Oh yeah.
So we were thinking about doing something like that. And they're like, "Do you want to do this?" I'm like, "I don't think I'm emotionally ready to do that. I don't think I'm not there yet. I don't want to do masonry and Hot Ones."
Well, and then you have to worry about, is there going to be an issue? Because the guy who does Hot Ones is probably going to be like, "What the hell are you
Oh
doing?"
yes, copyright. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, we've got to find something else to call it.
Yeah,
Something.
I mean, unless it's like obviously parody, and then it's like, yeah,
Right.
parody kind of, it gets a pass.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. So far, we've done so many of those. We did the Google search one.
Okay.
No one called us out on that, which was good. And we did like 5 or 6 sets of cards, and I'm sure the autocomplete it's called. So if anyone Googles it, it's just Google autocomplete videos. We've done those. That was good. And I literally told Maynard, I was like, let's just rip this. Worst case scenario, they tell us to shut it down. That's okay. But no one's, we don't have 1 million viewers or anything. It's not like, it's not like the actual Hot Ones.
Well, you could always do. I mean, I'm just brainstorming
Yeah.
here, but like, ChatGPT, write me a Masonic ritual. Or
That's right. Did you see that? What is it? It was
Joe
Joe Ages shared that.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see what the inputs was for that. Like, did they just upload stuff from like the Count Calistrago, like all those PDFs and stuff, and add it? I'm curious.
He
how
said
did
something
that.
about that. That's how they trained it. Was they just
had to be.
fed it all the ritual?
Yeah. So is that a violation of Masonic obligations?
Ah, it's not Masonic though. Illuminati? No.
Oh, okay. So it's not just Masonic. It's all secret society or anything that they could find online that they had.
So no, for that Illuminati bot or
Yeah.
whatever, no, it's just trained on Illuminati manuscripts.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like Masonic and fraternal societies as well.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Clearly, I didn't read the Facebook post well enough.
there is some crossover though, right? Because some of the Illuminati degrees were Masonic degrees,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And they emulated, well, but not in a version that we use here though, because it would have emulated strict observance,
Right.
and Baron von Hunt's, which doesn't really have any impact on American ritual.
Do you like ritual? Do you consider yourself a ritualist?
Yes, actually, I'm one of those nerds that it's like,
Nerd alert.
yeah, I prefer to, I enjoy memorizing ritual.
Memorizing ritual.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and reading ritual, right? So like, yeah, so I have all those books, Joe Age's books on
Yeah.
the Illuminati ritual, but like Art de Hoyos is consigned to the flames, and
Right.
and as a matter of fact, that is what Art is finishing up the intro for my next book, which is going to be
Nice.
the 36-degree system for the Ancient Oriental Order of Ishmael. It was a
Ishmael.
36-degree system practiced by Kenneth Mackenzie, F.G. Irwin, John
What time
Yarker.
frame are we talking here?
So this would be 1872 is the first that I see it show up in letters that were written
Okay.
between like Mackenzie and Irwin.
Okay.
He claims, of course, that it's older, but I mean, during that time, it's like, oh yeah, it's ancient, totally ancient,
Right.
given to me by hidden masters. I can't tell you,
In a scroll somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
they telecommunicate. It's
Even better.
Yeah, but no, he actually said, yeah, I was in Paris, I was visiting my father. His father was a surgeon, Kenneth
Okay.
Mackenzie,
Okay.
and I met this Arab professor at one of the French universities, and he initiated me into this order, and he made me the English representative. And when you read the letters, especially because Francis George Irwin, he was very much a ritual collector.
Okay.
And he also brought a lot of stuff that we use today, right? The Knights of Constantinople was propagated by him. Red Branch of Erie was
Okay.
all him, actually.
Okay.
So
they were involved in slightly involved in the Allied Masonic degrees.
what became the Allied
Right,
Masonic
right,
degrees?
right.
Yeah, they were actually proposing. So there was a council of Allied Masonic degrees in England at the time.
Right.
And Irwin and Mackenzie were like, no, we're going to do our own thing. It's going to be this council of orders.
Perfect.
Because, we got to be in charge.
It's our own thing now.
Yeah.
Yoink. We're taking this.
So, and it's kind of funny, though, that after all this time, Irwin stuff ends up becoming Allied Masonic degrees.
Right.
Because that's what they were trying to circumvent. So Ishmael, it's supposed to be like an Islamic degree system based on like the builders of the Kaaba and the builders of the pyramids. And it supposedly goes back, and actually even the documentation that they came up with, the history of the order talks about that it is probably the oldest fraternal order in the world. Yeah, and it was propagated from the times of Ishmael and Abraham, and actually the story starts with Abraham. In the degree system, the very first degree begins with Abraham when he's fleeing from Nimrod and the Chaldees, because Nimrod demands that they worship idols. And Abraham's like, no, I can't do that. And so he flees with his family west into the desert, and there he is taken in by a tribe of desert nomads, and they initiate him into their tribe, kind of.
Right.
But then as he progresses and he gets higher into it, then it becomes this whole elemental temple thing.
A little alchemy, you mean?
Oh yeah. So it's very cool.
Where does the 36, or is it sort of?
So it's broken up into 4 series of 9 degrees.
Wow.
And the 1st through the 27th is available to any member. The 28th through the 36th are knighthoods. They're very honorary.
Okay.
And there's a restriction on how many you can have. Like the 36th degree, there can only be 9 people, period, right? And they're members of the grand body.
Okay.
And then I think you have like 15, 21, and so it goes, it grows, it becomes a pyramid.
Right.
But the knighthood orders are very cool because we're both Knight Templars, right? It's
Sure.
like, oh yeah, we're familiar with knighthood. But
right.
when we read this, it's like you are now a knight of, Darius.
Crescent. Yeah.
And in each one of them, it takes a specific personage, and it has a lesson based on that person. And so it will say, you are now a knight of Darius. And there will be, you will now be proclaimed. And you are officially proclaimed with like trumpets and everything. And then you are marched with an escort to your seat. And there's a banner. And so with each one of these knighthoods, you get a banner. And so at the end of this, right, there's 9 in the series. So at the end of it, you are supposed to have like 9 banners and they call it a stable. You will be escorted back to your stable,
Fascinating.
And so I'm like, how cool would that be? It's like, I have my own banner, and I have, like, as I sit down, you could tell by looking at someone how progressed they are.
Yeah. Where did you come up? I mean, not come up. Excuse me. Where did you find this?
So originally, I saw mentioned somewhere online as I was doing research for something else, and you know how it is. You find, there was this order, and then like no other. I think I was originally looking up the Society of 8.
Okay.
And because the same people were involved with the Society of 8 as were involved in Ishmael and the ancient and primitive rites, it's all the same guys. I mean, these guys were. We talk about the innovators like J. Ray Shute in North Carolina,
right,
and his guys. These were the predecessors of Shute.
The early class, the class before Shute.
Yeah. And there was, so as I'm looking at anything I can find about the Society of 8, because I'm thinking alchemy, it's got to be cool, right? And,
sure.
I come across this reference of Order of Ishmael, and so I start looking on the internet, and there's almost nothing on them. And so I start looking into it more and more. I had a trip to England coming up, and I'm like, what can I research at UGLE?
Right.
And so I asked them for everything they had. Anything I thought may be related to Ishmael, and a couple of other things. because you never go research just one item. So I have
Good
like
luck.
a laundry of lists.
Yeah, you'll be done in 30 minutes or an hour.
So I show up. They had 3 boxes just full of material over the course of 2 days. And when you have that much stuff, you don't have the time to actually read through it.
Yeah.
So I just took pictures
That's
of everything.
scanning. Yep. That's at that point you're just scanning, and hopefully the picture comes out well that you can read it again.
Yeah, and at first it's going to bring the document scanner, but then I realized my iPhone has a much better camera than even my document scanner has.
Now the iPhones are really good. Yeah, I forgot which one do I have. I've got a really good one that I've used since grad school, if you can believe it.
Okay.
Scanner Pro.
Okay.
I've used it since grad school. I'm not joking. I've had it for like 10 years, and they keep updating it. I bought a lifetime license back in the day when it was like $60, and people were like, "You're gonna spend $60 on a phone app?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure."
whole dollars.
As long as the company didn't fold, they said that they'll make adjustments. And to this guy's credit, he's been like making adjustments to it for like 10 years, and it's fantastic.
That's awesome. I'm using Adobe Scanner
Oh, okay.
Pro.
Yeah. That's good because it's like connected with Adobe systems. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of integration there.
So, and you can adjust the size of the picture, and it'll
Yeah.
skew it and
Yep.
everything for you, and
Yep.
then you export as PDF, and it's already done.
It's great. So back to Ishmael.
Yes.
You couldn't find this in the United States. You had to go to England or excuse me, Grand Lodge to find this stuff.
Correct. Yeah,
So this is an English degree system.
it is.
Interesting.
Yeah, I did see reference to there may have been a couple of members in Canada
Okay.
through Major Irwin. He was the second head of the order. He kind of inherited it when Kenneth Mackenzie died. He had a lot of connections because he was stationed in Canada for a while, so he conferred it upon some of his old army buddies in
Makes
Canada.
sense. Yeah. Commonwealth.
But I don't think it ever really went anywhere. And to be honest, I don't think it was very widely practiced. And I even have some letters between Irwin and Yarker where Yarker was kind of complaining about there's so many degrees, it would
Yeah.
take forever for somebody to go in through all of them,
Right.
and no one's going to pay for this. And I thought that was weird. It's like, so Yarker was complaining no one's going to pay for the degree system because there's too much to it.
Out of all people.
Right. But then again, I mean, look at what he did with Memphis Misram was
Right.
he cut that down.
You shortened
too.
it down. Yeah.
What was it, like 30
Streamlined it.
degrees?
Yeah. Streamlining, I guess.
So, but I showed up at the library, and it's funny because they told me that no one had asked for that material in as long as they, remember.
Fascinating.
But yet, when I showed up, Pierre Molière,
Yeah, Pierre, sure, out of France.
he was there, and Martin Cherry asked, "Hey, would you mind?" Because Pierre happened to ask for some of the same material. Would you mind sharing it? I'm like, no, not at all.
Yeah.
So I got to meet Pierre.
Very nice.
So fantastic guy, and it was weird that nobody ever wanted this, and 2 guys show up on the same day
Interesting.
looking at the same material. But he was looking for the French connection, with
Right.
Ishmael. And yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's really not much there. So I'd love to know if he has anything in his archive.
Yeah.
Because the only thing I saw was, so there was a member who was trying to get in, and Mackenzie was being kind of coy about it, and it actually led to a blow up between Mackenzie and Irwin.
Okay.
But Irwin was trying to get this other guy in. This other guy wrote to Mackenzie. Mackenzie's like, "Oh yeah, write to the Secretary General in Paris. Here's his name and address." And so the guy writes to him, and about 9 months later gets the letter back from the dead letter office. It went nowhere. And I'm thinking, Mackenzie probably knew, and that was a way of just blowing this guy up.
Weird.
But that led to the blow up between Irwin and Mackenzie, where Irwin actually states, "Hey, you could probably write all the ritual in the world. I have no doubt that you
Right.
have the ability, but you need to stop being so coy about it. If
Right.
we're going to do it, let's do
Let's
it.
do it.
You
Yeah.
know, I've been asking for the ritual now as a member for the past 2 years at this point, and every time there's something coming up. So let's either do it or stop talking about it."
Right.
And then Mackenzie takes it the wrong way. When the guy who had the dead letter returned to him, when he tells Irwin about it, and he writes to Mackenzie after that and said, okay, so what now? And Mackenzie's like, Irwin doesn't want to talk about it anymore.
Hmm.
So it was a very weird thing. But during that time, the 1880s, all those orders were made up. And
Right.
so you always
Right.
had to have this pedigree. And even if it was a mythological history, it was super important, I think, it's almost like, unless something was perceived to be ancient, it
Right.
wasn't taken seriously.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I think that was a standard thing in all fraternities or societies. There was this idea that it's hidden knowledge. It's this, it's sort of through this stuff. It was in ancient Greece or ancient, Egypt. We found these things and they created, and it seems to me as an interest in not just. I mean, Egyptology was big in the 1820s, sort of the early 19th century. But then it sort of grew and expanded into the Middle East.
Yeah.
Knights Templar, the discussions around the Knights. I make the argument that I think the Knights Templar did more to sort of bring that history of the Crusades into common discussion, where I can see people doing a degree on, the Saracens, or these enemies of the savage enemies of the Christian knights. Who are these individuals? And so people might find that be particularly interesting. They create these degree systems around it.
Well, and these were the same guys too who were taking on like a Hindu flavored degree system, because they were the exact same guys who were doing Satbai.
Right.
Yeah.
And Pike was even interested in that stuff. He was fascinated with East Indian or Indo, what we would call Indo-Asian cultures now, or religions.
Well, that was also the period though of ad fontes, right?
Right.
If it's older, it must be purer.
Yes, that's right. That's right. It's adulterated now. We wanted something that's clean and pristine. Yeah, that's interesting. So you already went to the Grand Lodge, and you reviewed and you collected, and so now you're just basically compiling it into a book.
Yeah. So
do you have the ritual, or is it just you have snippets of the ritual or structure of the rituals?
No, I have 4 different copies of the ritual.
Oh wow.
So I have in the book I actually date them.
Okay.
Because they were kind enough to date them for me, right? Like, so you have John Yarker signed one,
Got it.
1907.
Okay.
So I believe the oldest copy, it says that it's Mackenzie's, but comparing the handwriting, it's actually Irwin.
Okay.
So Irwin wrote this, and I think this may have been when Mackenzie actually gave him a copy of the rituals. This was his personal copies that he transcribed. And then in the oldest one, it's hasty handwriting. You could tell he was in a hurry. And then
Shorthand?
No, it was just sloppy.
Got it.
You could tell it's the same writer as his
writing
letters.
it quickly.
But yeah, he's writing it quickly. And even the pages it's like construction paper that's been glued together to make a book. So, and it's all in pencil.
Oh wow.
And then there's another copy, and it's also Irwin's handwriting, but it's almost like he took the time to, now that I have it, let me put it into something that I can actually use.
Yeah.
And so he rewrote it, and that is probably the best version of it. Then there's a typewritten version that was created by John Yarker from 1907. So you're talking about 30 years later, and it's heavily influenced.
Is it the same, or are there variations in the wording, the structure?
No, there are a lot of variations.
Okay.
And so that's what I did, was I tried to put together like a comprehensive version of the ritual, something that was workable.
Nice.
And then the 4th version is the most interesting one. So Yarker had typewritten the entire degree system, the 36 degree system.
Okay.
But the 4th version, part of it, I can't identify the handwriting, but there are 4 lectures, which are key because I can't find them anywhere else in the other copies. There are 4 lectures in Westcott's handwriting.
Okay.
So.
And who's Westcott?
William Wynne Westcott.
Okay.
Yeah, the Golden Dawn and SRIA. That 4th copy was Westcott's copy, and I don't know if he had someone else transcribe it for him, and then he added his own, lectures to it
Right.
at a later time. But that one is the truncated, I would say, post-Yarker version, where, as I said, Yarker had complained it's too large of a degree system.
Right.
And so what they did was they collapsed it to where now it was 1 degree would cover the entire series of 9 degrees.
Okay.
So it was now a 4-degree system
Right.
that tried to touch on every one of them. And then the lecture was kind of a recap in like a history behind the series.
Well, it's certainly doable. Was this open to any non-Masons? It could be anyone. It wasn't necessarily Masonic requirement.
So it's interesting, yes and no.
Okay.
I would say no, because it was only Masons who were invited to be a part of it. There's nothing that excludes women or anything else. And we know that Westcott, right, was okay with that.
Sure, certainly.
Because of the Golden Dawn.
Right.
And I mean, plus one of his mentors was Anna Kingsford, right? She was
Okay.
a huge influence on him. But the reason I say no is because some of the guys are kind of interesting. They were Masons for a short time, and then they're no longer a member of a regular lodge.
Interesting.
But they're still doing all this Masonic activity. So Mackenzie was a member for like a year, maybe 2. But he was still somehow, even though he had demitted from his lodge and he wasn't attached to any other lodge,
Right.
he was still a member of the SRIA. It's like, how does that work?
Right. Could he have been in a regular lodge that people didn't know about, or maybe it turned out to be regular, but they didn't know that it was irregular or clandestine?
I don't
There's
know.
no record to suggest that.
I don't see any. I see the record. I
Yeah.
can find this record of where he demitted.
Right.
A lot of people may not realize this. On Ancestry.com, UGLE has all of their member records on there.
Oh wow.
So I was able to actually find when and where Mackenzie, Yarker, Irwin, and Westcott received their degrees.
Wow.
And you can actually see, when they joined the lodge, when they demitted. So I saw Mackenzie leave the lodge, and I never saw him. I couldn't find any record. It doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
But there was no record of him being a member anywhere else after that. But he may have had a special pass also, because he was technically a Master Mason, just not associated with any lodge.
Right.
And his uncle was the Grand Secretary of UGLE.
Oh, that helps.
And then he had another uncle who was the Prime Minister of Canada. So, but this is weird. This has actually turned into more of an interview of me. So,
Oh no, this is how we do it, man. This is Roadcast. No rules.
so Federal Lodge number 1.
Federal number 1.
I've been doing some research.
Okay.
There's 2 papers I'm thinking about doing. It's 2 aspects of the same topic.
Okay.
The Cherokees, when they came
Yes.
over to Oklahoma, they didn't just go to Oklahoma. Part of them also went to Texas. And that's an interesting story because, of course, we know them from the Trail of Tears. But there were groups that came over beforehand because they're like, well, this government has not dealt with us in a good way. So we're going to go west, and maybe we can kind of keep out of their range so they stop messing with us.
Right.
So there was a group of Texas Cherokee under Chief John Bowles.
Mm-hmm.
Chief John Bowles was a good friend of Sam Houston. And there's even anecdotal evidence that he may have been married to one of John Bowles' daughter, Sam Houston.
Okay.
Right? And Sam Houston was accepted by the Cherokees.
This wasn't a polygamous situation, was it?
No.
Okay.
No. One at a time, from what I can
got
see.
it. Okay.
So John Bowles and Sam Houston were good friends.
Okay.
Bowles stayed with Houston several times, and Houston had given Chief Bowles a hat, a vest, and a cavalry saber. While Sam Houston was president of the Republic of Texas, he was also trying to work out a treaty with the Texas Cherokee.
That's right.
And when Marable Lamar became president, so some say that he decided that he wasn't going to honor any of the treaties that Sam Houston was working on. And so there was Marable Lamar was a Texas Mason. Actually, every president, vice president, and secretary of state for the Republic of Texas were
Was
Masons.
Masons.
Another Mason, who was General Burleson, was tasked to go kick the Texas Cherokee out of Texas. So he goes and he meets with with John Bowles and says the president has decided that we need you to vacate this land because there were settlers who were already trying to encroach on the land. So
Right.
it's like, okay, we'll clear them out.
Right.
And so Chief Bowles, he goes back to his people, and the decision is made if the Texian army would give them time to harvest their crops, they would voluntarily leave.
Okay.
And he took this back to General Burleson, and General Burleson said, no, we demand that you leave immediately. And so Chief Bowles told him, you leave me in a predicament because if I tell you no, then you and your army will kill me. But if I tell you yes, we'll accede to your demands,
Right.
my own people will kill me.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place.
So it leads to a battle. And at this time, Chief Bowles is like 85, something. He's
Okay.
old. And when the battle comes, Chief Bowles gets on his horse wearing the hat, the vest, the sword that Sam Houston gave him, and he leads the charge
Wow.
against the Texans. And so it's an entire day of battles. The Cherokee charge, they go back, they do it again all
Right.
day long.
Right.
The next day, Chief John Bowles gets on his horse, does it again. So this is the second day now of this 85-year-old man
Right.
riding at the head of the charge. A bullet goes through his leg during one of the charges, embeds itself in his horse. His horse goes lame. So he goes back to the Cherokee side of the line to exchange his horse. And as he's doing so, he gets shot in the back. And as he's laying on the ground, there's a lieutenant who actually writes about it. And he says, as I approached him, he was singing his war song. He was on the ground. And I turned him over and I was trying to get aid for him. And a captain came up. And while Chief Bowles was on the ground injured, and this Texian lieutenant was trying to help him, the captain walks up and just shoots him in the head.
Ooh.
And the claim was that the Texian captain his family had been massacred by Cherokee.
Okay.
So, difficult times all around.
Yes.
But as a result, because he was the man who killed Chief John Bowles, they gave him his sword, the sword that had been given to him by Sam Houston.
That's interesting.
He then takes it, and he's a Mason. He takes it back to his home lodge. It becomes the Tyler sword in the Masonic Lodge in Henderson, Texas.
Okay.
It stays there. So this happened in the 1830s.
Okay.
It's used as the Tyler sword for decades. Civil War breaks out.
Do they know the provenance of the sword? Or is it just so happened to be the lodge sword, like the Tyler sword?
I don't know,
Okay.
to be honest.
Yeah.
I know that they would have known that it was John Bowles' sword. I'm not sure if they would have known it was given to him by Sam Houston.
Got it. Okay.
So during the Civil War, one of their members, an attorney, becomes an officer, and they present the sword and they ask him to carry it with them in battle during the Civil War. So it leaves the lodge for that time, for a couple of years. He returns, the lodge continues to use the sword. And this is where my story is, right? So the paper I want to write for Texas Lodge of Research is the story of Sam Houston, this sword, and the death of Chief Bowles.
Okay.
Now, the paper I want to write for the Oklahoma Lodge of Research is at some point in the 1880s, 1890s. So the Cherokee set themselves, they have the Cherokee Nation in Tahlequah, Oklahoma is where their capital is of the Cherokee Nation. And the oldest lodge in Oklahoma is actually located in Tahlequah as well. The Cherokees brought it with them. The reason I perked up when he said Federal Lodge number 1 is so a lot of people don't realize that the Cherokee Nation is who brought Masonry to Oklahoma. And they did it in 1848.
Some of those guys were initiated in Federal Lodge number 1.
Exactly. And
that's right.
Because when they would go to visit, or when they would go to Washington, D.C., to talk about treaties,
that's right,
they would sit in Federal Lodge number 1.
So Federal Lodge has this weird little connection which not a lot of people talk about. I think most people, when they think of Federal Lodge number 1, they think about the White House because its first core charter members, James Hoban, master of the lodge, architect of the White House.
Right.
Stevenson, all these other interesting figures, carpenters, stoneworkers, masons, blah, 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 blah. That first class of masons, that first class, maybe about a decade or two, they sort of die out.
Okay.
There's not a lot of activity. The lodge goes into a slightly dormant state. It's still making masons, but it's very, it doesn't really talk about its history. It's sort of just operating.
Okay. It's existing.
It's existing. That's right. Now, there's an upswing after the Morgan affair, and the Morgan affair doesn't really cause it because D.C. is the only jurisdiction that I could find where there was more Masons initiated during the Morgan affair. We actually had a higher population of Masons in D.C. during the Morgan affair than any other jurisdiction, which I find really hilarious. But there's a point in time where politics starts to weave into, or the lodge gets into this weird, like, I call it Zelig mode, or who was it? What was his name? Tom Hanks in a Forrest Gump mode, where they start to be involved in a national history.
Okay.
So, first example, you're talking about the Cherokee. Absolutely. The Cherokee, a delegation of Cherokee come to Washington, D.C. for government claims. They are going to Congress. This is where, famously congressmen go, well, those were old terms, and you guys, broke these terms during the Civil War, and so we're not considering these terms. We're creating new terms. And there's a whole, Bob Davis, for example, has written a lot about Pike and all that stuff. So we do know that a group of them did come and were initiated and then came out and then sort of helped establish lodges and grand lodges and all these organizations. Mm-hmm. The Federal Lodge has never digitized those records. I am now in the process of digitizing those records. So we're gonna get close to getting that information for you. So the Cherokee Nation, number one, that is true.
Okay.
The other thing, which is really weird, is Chinese delegation. In the turn of the 20th century, the Chinese delegation came to the United States, was initiated at Federal Lodge number one. Mm-hmm. They made the argument that said, well, we brought the Cherokee in as well, so you obviously want to come with us because we have that tradition of supporting and establishing and helping, support different groups around the community.
We're multicultural like that.
Exactly. Like one of the earliest forms of like multiculturalism in Masonry. The head of the organization, the delegation, goes back to the Imperial China and it becomes, I think, the finance minister.
Okay.
So there's this real interesting like connection of like Masonry in China starting from Federal Lodge number one as well.
Amazing.
In the 1840s, a guy named Duff Green, I don't know if you're familiar with that name. If you're familiar with Tennessee Masonry, Duff Green was one of Andrew Jackson's part of his kitchen cabinet. Okay. Duff Green was in charge of a couple different newspapers. He then purchased a newspaper in D.C. and started to put out a lot of, pro-Jackson government stuff. Duff Green joins the lodge. He was already Mason. Joins Federal Lodge, affiliates, I believe, and then becomes master in 1 or 2 years and uses the lodge as a I don't know what to call it, but a sort of arm of social life in Freemasonry in D.C.
Okay. It became like the French salons back in the day.
Yeah, that's right. Like Masonry was like with Andrew Jackson there. So Andrew Jackson was participating in activities. He didn't attend Federal Lodge, but he became an honorary member of the lodge. He accepted that position, and I think he was postmaster general as well. Okay. Or something. There was another, and it's in my book. I just don't have it off the top of my head. But he is now, mind you, this is Andrew Jackson. Okay. This is the guy that's kicking out, who's helping push these tribes out of their territories. So that same lodge, Federal Lodge, that brings in Andrew Jackson and Duff Green, who's supporting this mechanism of bringing Andrew Jackson into power and keeping him to power, decades later is bringing in the Cherokee and is bringing and initiating these men who's lost their territories because of the guy from the lodge, 2 decades before. Right. So Federal Lodge gets involved in this weird, mix of different things. So yeah, we're digitizing the records of the lodge, and so I think more of that information is going to come out. So I'm happy to help you get that information for your article.
Yeah, I would love to see, because as I've been doing my research, I found like in Federal Lodge there were two competing. I don't know. I guess you would say that the Cherokee Nation was facing its own internal strife,
Right.
right? And they broke up into the two camps, right? And there were those who wanted to kind of appease Washington and, yeah, we'll comply with your
Keep the
demands.
status quo. Yeah.
And there were those who were like, no, they're obviously going to break their word again, so
Right.
we just need to strike out on our own, leave them behind. And it led to conflict and a little bit of bloodshed in the Cherokee Nation. And those two sides came together in Federal Lodge. They had this conflict first in Tennessee and then in Oklahoma, and they finally resolved all those issues between themselves in a Masonic lodge.
Yeah. The District of Columbia has had a long tradition of using Masonic halls for public spaces. I mean, and that's really common in any. It doesn't necessarily mean us, but DC's City Hall. So the first City Hall that DC, well, actually before their first City Hall, because the first City Hall for the District of Columbia was established in 1822.
Okay.
District of Columbia was the District of Columbia since 1790. They set up the District of Columbia in 1790 under the Residence Act. So for the first, 3 decades, they were effectively operating the city council, the board of aldermen, on the first floor of the Masonic Hall.
Okay.
So to me, when they say, oh yeah, these Masons, they went to the city hall, or they went to the Masonic Hall to do their business. Well, yeah, because there's a history, tradition of 3 decades of, you go to the Masonic Hall, the first floor, to pay your taxes, to meet the city council, to do all this stuff. So, and by the way, where that city hall now would be where the Trump Hotel, or whatever the Waldorf Hotel is. So it's only a block or two away from the White House.
Okay.
Now, over time, the physical needs of the District of Columbia's Masons was so that they needed to move out into a bigger space. And so they sold that property. That property then it first became, at least according to our history, it first was sold to Freemasons of African descent.
Okay.
Don't know what that means. Doesn't know if it was Prince Hall. We just know that it was Freemasons of African descent.
Right.
And then over time, that land was then purchased to become the post office. So the big post office building in the district, and then it became the Trump Hotel, and then the Waldorf, I think it is now.
Okay.
I don't remember what it is. It might be the Ritz-Carlton, actually, whatever it is now. But yeah, so there's certainly a lot of history with DC and City Hall and city activities and the Cherokee. There's a great story, if you mind me telling.
Yeah, absolutely.
In 1904, when they were trying to build their most sort of the largest Masonic hall, they had this huge Masonic fair, and it was called the National Masonic Exposition, or it was the National Masonic Exposition and Fair. And it was Federal Lodge's Chinese delegation, the same guys that got initiated, that went to the Emperor of China and said, we'd like to donate something to the fair as a fundraiser. And so the fair received this cargo from the Imperial Palace itself with tea from the Emperor's own personal tea, like reserves. Apparently, back in the day, they didn't have photography, so newspaper journalists did a very good job of describing stuff because they didn't have photographs to do it.
Right.
And so the journalist wrote something to the effect of that it was all these teas were in individual packets with the Emperor's personal seal on it with a gold leaf, and it was given out as fundraiser for Federal Lodge number 1. I'm almost certain that Cherokee or indigenous tribes somewhat also contributed through Federal Lodge because we got money from Wild Bill from the company, his touring company. I think $100, and then we received items and articles from different Masons around the country, and lodges would be the one that send them out and say, hey, we're fundraising. Do you have anything interesting that we can give out and sell as a fundraiser? And so Marie Curie in Paris literally sent over radioactive material. And when they were recently doing a renovation of the building, I reached out to their architect and I said, hey, did you ever find a lead or copper box in there? Please don't open it. Because there's a very, very strong case that they put radium in one of the stones or in a metal container or a lead container into the building.
It's amazing.
Yeah. That's my rant. So yes, Cherokee. Very big.
It's safe. Trust me.
Yes, that's
I
right.
handle this stuff all the time.
Oh, sure. What is this called? Radium?
Right.
Why is it emitting this weird green glow? Better put it in a box.
What's that spot?
That's fine. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So the Cherokee, interesting, and it's like a forgotten part of history, right?
Yeah. And weirdly enough, because the lodge never digitized its records, we have all these lost stories that I just found through newspaper clippings. And I was like, wait a minute, I didn't know about this. Yeah. There was a newspaper clipping, the same thing you mentioned. I found that story of the negotiations between the different tribes trying to, or different sects or the different groups coming together. I found that through a newspaper. I didn't find that in a Masonic proceeding.
Yeah.
So you find these stories randomly out there in the wild.
Well, so that's how I found the story about the sword, because the sword is now in Tahlequah at the Masonic Lodge there. And I'm like, how did it get there?
Yeah.
And so I started looking into it. And it turns out, so Henderson Lodge, in the 1880s, 1890s, there was a decision that the lodge would present, because they knew it was Chief Bowles' sword.
Right.
They were going to present it to the Cherokee Nation. And what's interesting is I've talked to a couple of members of that lodge.
Right.
And anecdotal information again, it's, according to them, the lodge voted on it, the vote failed, and so some members stole the sword and gave it without permission of the lodge. But I find that hard to believe, because the newspaper, again, is a wealth of information for researchers.
That's right.
I found that there was a doctor who had traveled to Texas, and he was given the sword and asked to present it to the Cherokee Nation when he returned to Tahlequah. And so the Cherokee Nation, they held a joint session of their legislature. He was formally received by the legislature.
So there you go.
And the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation made a big presentation about it. It was in all the newspapers.
Wow.
And the Cherokee Nation legislature drafted a proclamation of thanks to the Masonic Lodge in Henderson.
Nice.
And so it's like, that wouldn't have happened if
That's
it
right.
was a
That's
stolen sword.
Yeah.
So this was official, and I think everyone just forgot about it. And so
Yeah.
now the story is, oh yeah, they stole it. Of
Yes.
course. How else would it arrive?
How many other how many? I think it's that's the problem with Masonic research. I would find it's that there's the telephone game effect, where it's like all of a sudden the story, a story morphs over time, over decades perhaps. And then the other thing is just like non-reliable narrators for Masonic histories. So you'll have a good Masonic history written by a brother, and they'll say, well, we don't have information, but we think this is what happened.
Right.
And then all of a sudden someone takes that and goes, well, this is what happened because it's in this book. It's like, well, that's not really true at all.
It becomes a self-perpetuating myth.
Yeah.
It's
The whole like Lafayette, Marquis de Lafayette giving George Washington an apron. The first story, the origin of that story comes from in 1904. Lafayette never gave George Washington an apron. His wife never was an expert on French or symbology, that she's sitting there creating the apron and then giving it to Lafayette and going, all right, numbnuts, go and give this to George Washington. When you go to, giving an apron to the President of the United States at the time, because in 1784, Lafayette returns to the United States.
Right.
There was a horde of reporters following everything that he does. If the guy spat on a Mason, someone wrote it down. And so the fact that there's no record of him even giving that gift, no record of Washington, thanking him for it, and letters of correspondence. So it's just these stories that people make up, and then all of a sudden people write Texas Lodge of Research papers on it. Well, I'm sure no one's written about it.
Well, because it's in a book that's over 100
It's in a
years
book.
old. It has to be true,
Correct.
right?
That's right.
I'm going to properly cite it in the proper formation, and it is legit.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing the due diligence of citing your sources. I appreciate that, because God forbid we still get papers that are like, this sentence is not cited,
Yeah.
and this is an important sentence. You got to show me your work. So yeah, it's interesting.